All right, guys, quick podcast here so we can move on with our writing. We're in the middle of Han Dynasty China here. And Han Wuti is going to be known as the Marshal Emperor. He sets the hallmark for all strong Chinese dynasties as he begins to expand the size of the empire. He goes southward into Vietnam, eastward over into the Koreas, and on the northern border, here is our cause and effect when it comes to the barbarians in the Roman Empire. He fights the Xiongnu, the Mongols from the Gobi Desert, and he begins to shove them out onto the Asian steppes. And he hires southern Mongol mercenaries to fight their northern cousins. And to cement relationships with them, he becomes allies with some of these barbarian tribes, and he allows some of them to trade with Chinese merchants, and he gave some royal title and even sent Chinese brides. If you've seen the horrible sequel to Mulan, Mulan 2, that is the crux of that story. We will send Chinese aristocratic brides to marry in and cement ties with these barbarian allies. Han Wuti will also relocate he put 100,000 trained Chinese soldiers to live on the Chinese steppes as a visible sign of defense if the Mongols came back. By doing this, he will destroy Mongol power in the southern part of the Gobi Desert, and his plan was to have a defensive shield wall there. So if the Mongols ever came back, they would have to fight through a trained army and a city. And so he will forcibly relocate 700,000 Chinese civilians to these steppes. Very similar to ancient Rome giving its retired legions, the land that they conquered, forming that shield around the perimeter and the border of the empire. If you're going to attack China, first you got to go through the army and these civilians. Now, all this was done north of the Great Wall to show off Chinese culture and technology. There's 800,000 people now north of the wall, a major decisive force of Chinese people. Now, together, the emperor, his army, and this new city will destroy the Mongol power base. And this defeat has economic consequences for China, as now people are able to travel safely along the Silk Road and along the border of the Great Wall. The Silk Road will extend to the Koreas and past the Jade Gate, past the western end of China, and it will eventually extend its way all the way over to ancient Rome. By the time Han Wuti is finished, he has an empire about the size of the modern-day continental United States. And when it comes to Han government, that is where the Han Wuti and his descendants are extremely brilliant. They keep most of the centralized framework of the old Qin dynasty, the Qin central bureaucracy, but they simply make it look different. They have the same governmental structure, they just change the names. And one of the things that made the Han Dynasty successful over a long period of time was that the governing officials were organized by grade on the civil service exam. I cannot demonstrate or say enough how important the civil service exam was to China. Scholars were sent to special Confucian schools. When they're done, they have to take a test. And it was your grade on this test that determined where you worked. An average grade will place you in a Chinese village. A good grade, above average grade, puts you in a fairly large-sized city. An excellent grade puts you in a large-sized metropolitan area, or even able to advise the emperor himself. And while test scores are great, they were not the only determining factor for governing officials. A person getting a job also has to be sponsored by another governing official. This was their check and balance system. This was extremely important because if I, excuse me, so to speak, nominate William, I recommend William for a job, and William fails, not only does he get fired, but so do I. That means it's not going to be a good old boy network. You're not going to give your brother or your next door neighbor's son a job just because you know them. It's not who you know, it's what you know. Chinese officials did not want to lose their jobs, so they only sponsored and recommended the correct people. And it is this system that will allow the Han Dynasty to carry on for the better part of 400 years. The Han government and the scholar officials were so well trained, they kept things going even when there was a bad or a weak emperor. When China experienced its knuckleheads like Caligula and Nero, the government officials just kept it going. They were well trained, well educated, and well selected. And so governing a population of about 1,200 people, or of 60 million people, is a Confucian bureaucracy of only 120,000. Right? The Han Dynasty runs extremely well and it runs efficiently. And these Confucian officials were going to justify the mandate of heaven. It is going to make them useful. There was a large amount of record keeping necessary. Everything needed to be written and documented. So the Confucian classics become the standard for education in Han Dynasty China. The philosophy was that a good Confucian education would create good, honest, and moral men. They would be excellent role models for the people. They would keep filial piety going, and therefore good officials. They would be honest, they would be trustworthy, and as always, they wouldn't do the popular thing. They would do what? Exactly, guys. They would do the right thing, not the popular thing. So as a result, the Confucian government would be led by virtuous and talented men who stayed away from the problems that will plague other dynasties of China, that cyclical series of problems we see again and again and again. And Han wanted to streamline his government. He wanted it to be efficient. Not only does he have good officials, but he didn't want it to be too big. And since he was a dominant kind of hands-on emperor, he wanted a government that he could manage and keep an eye on and control. He liked to be advised or to know just about everything that was going on. So his governmental bureaucracies were small and limited in their function. Everybody had a specific job, and there were 5 main duties. Duty number 1 was to keep a current census. This census enabled the Confucian government to know and help them collect taxes. Knowing how many people there were in the empire, how many people were in each town and city, and even better, what area made and consumed the most resources. The more resources an area consumes, the more taxes they paid. The more prosperous, the greater the harvest in an area, the more taxes they paid. This was balanced. If you were in a rural, poor economic area, you didn't pay as much as a large, wealthy area. It's a very similar idea that what happened with Augustus Caesar over in ancient Rome. You use more, you pay more. You're more profitable, you pay more, because you never know when you're going to have that down year, things fluctuated, you didn't have to pay as many taxes. And this process allowed the Han government to be flexible with their taxes. It wasn't an ironclad mandate every year. In times of famine or scarcity, you could kind of carry a district or an area for a while. Second job was administering lungs. Having laws that were uniform and codified. It means they didn't change and they applied the same to everyone. Becomes a goal and a priority in Han China. Punishment was quickly but fairly carried out. Chinese people were told and they knew what was right, they knew what was wrong, and what the punishment would be if you broke that law. It's what they did. Government office number 3 is training military forces. We got to have a good army. Han Wu-Ti is a warrior. This is what he does. So he always wanted to know what was going on in his military, the current strength, where they were at, strength of the enemy, how the training was going, and who could be a possible threat to his empire. Now that he carved it out, once you get it, the next thing you have to do is make sure you can keep it. Number 4, he needed his civil engineer. You have to manage your public works projects. Make sure the irrigation canals are working. Crops are not only being watered, but they are grown and being harvested. Trading canals and roads are policed. They're kept in good repair. Bridges are taken care of. Once again, if something is wearing out, the Han government had the money to pay for its maintenance up front. Prevent it from breaking before it does. And these merchants, while we didn't like them on the social scale, they let us know what was going on, who could be a potential threat to Han China. Last but not least, maintaining the royal household. The royal palace was a small empire in and of itself. It was the entire court. Not only did the emperor live there, but it was the center of the government. It required its own internal bureaucracy. Large or small outlying districts away in the countryside and the provinces were left in the hands of trusted local nobles who handled local problems. It was the emperor's job to look over the large national ones. The tiny little nitty-gritty details wasn't necessary. If the stoplight isn't working at the corner of High School and Homestead Road, that's the local government's job. I, as the emperor, have to watch over the entire thing. And so he left local decisions in the hands of nobles, and he took care of the large problems. And one of the things that makes Han Wu-Ti and his successors successful was his government maintained the royal household. It was streamlined and functional, so he could organize and focus on the running of the country as a whole. The small day-to-day problems inside the palace, somebody else took care of, so he could lead and govern his people. And all of this allows for some great cultural advancements. Han Dynasty, again, is one of the golden ages of China with the technology that grows at this time. One of the things that they create is durable paper from wood pulp, long-lasting durable paper that will aid in writing and in record keeping. To further grow water travel, the Chinese developed the Sternpost Rudder. Instead of having guys with oars, row on the right to paddle, to turn left and row on the left to turn right, well, you had a steering chain and a steering wheel, like a pirate, ran down through the bottom of the ship to this fin, this rudder. And this rudder turned like the steering wheel of your car. It gave the ship more stability. It gave it more maneuverability and steering controls. They could go into different waters and on the high seas and be able to steer and navigate their ship. Stirrups were invented for riding a horse to give you more stability and balance when you're on a horse, making the Han cavalry and the army more efficient. And they developed rope suspension bridges, think of old Indiana Jones bridges, that like Grandfather Mountain, you go up there, whose dad goes up there and bounces on a suspension bridge and scares people. All right, I'm one of the guys that does that. They did that to cross valleys and rivers and chasms where the Romans had the arch, the Han has that suspension bridge. Medically, the Han were advanced. Mr. Campbell just brought over his Chinese medicine textbook from his Chinese history class in college. The Han were able to perfect recipes for herbal remedies for sicknesses. You got a headache, you have a pain here, you have a cold. This is what you take to get better. My recipe, some of you know, when I get a head cold, I get hot and spicy soup. I have a former student whose grandma owns a restaurant. She's got a special recipe. I drink a quart of that and poof, the head cold is gone. And they also develop anesthesia to relieve pain when treating illnesses and or broken bones. So they will medicate you so you don't feel a lot of pain, so you're setting a broken bone hurts. So these were just some of the things the Chinese developed at this time. Their most valued achievement, however, was the creation of silk. Silk was such a highly sought after substance that the method of silk making was again kept a secret under threat of pain of death. If anybody revealed it, they would be put to death because it brings China money, power, and prestige. Tomorrow, after we write a little bit more, we'll finish up the Han Dynasty after Han Wu Ti, and hopefully we'll finish this unit up and we can get moving on to other things. So thanks for watching. We'll see you guys soon.